Under the pale sun of a frozen dawn, a silver silhouette carves across the sky above the Yalu River. No markings visible yet, only the glint of metal and the sound, thin, sharp, like a blade being drawn. Below, a lone American bomber, an RB-29 Superfortress, codenamed Overexposed, lumbers through the thin air. A silver giant on a reconnaissance mission, trusting in its altitude for protection.
Since our forces maintain control of the air over Korea, the tactical bombers operate freely.
For months, America's bombers have ruled these skies uncontested. But today, something has changed. A streak of vapor arcs upward like a sickle raised to the heavens, then sighs down impossibly fast and merciless. Today, the hunters have become the hunted. What appeared that day in late 1950 was not just another Soviet jet. It was the embodiment of a nation's furious resolve to prove it would never again trail behind the West. The Cold War was no longer theoretical. It was here, screaming through the clouds at near the speed of sound. In Moscow, the Kremlin understood that the United States air power was the backbone of its might. Its bombers, its atomic monopoly, its aura of untouchable supremacy. To strike fear into that machine, the Soviets needed wings of their own that could climb higher, turn sharper, and strike faster. The roots of that ambition reached back to the dying embers of the Second World War. As Berlin fell, Soviet engineers swept through hangars filled with Germany's unfinished dreams, the Me-262, the Ta-183, fragments of swept-wing research buried under rubble. But blueprints and schematics from a fallen empire will only get you so far. America's nuclear bombers called for, nay demanded, an interceptor that could climb to the edge of space and strike with the full might of the Soviet Union. Stalin called on his scientists to make the future from scratch. But the future would require more than German scribbles on graph paper and half-baked models in abandoned hangars. It would require industrial discipline, political will, a dash of luck, and the silhouette of nuclear annihilation on the horizon. The call came in 1946 from the Ministry of Aviation Industry. Design a fighter capable of speeds of 1,000 kilometers per hour that could climb to over 15,000 meters and outfight anything that the Americans could field. Many doubted it could be done. The Soviet Union had no reliable jet engine of its own, but Stalin's diplomats played a patient game. The Soviet aviation minister, Mikhail Khrushchev, persuaded Stalin to purchase and reverse engineer the Rolls-Royce Nene engines, the most advanced turbojet engines in the world. Stalin reportedly laughed when told of the idea. What fool would sell us his secrets? A British fool, it turns out. The British Labour government, in desperate need of cash veiled as an olive branch of diplomacy, agreed to sell the USSR 25 Rolls-Royce Nene engines. Vladimir Klimov began meticulously reverse engineering the Nene, creating the Klimov RD-45, an unlicensed copy, shortly followed by the improved and more powerful VK-1. With the engine in hand, the task fell to a young design bureau led by Artem Mikoyan and Mikhail Guryevich, men who understood that simplicity was the truest sophistication. Their bureau, MiG, had built serviceable fighters during the war. This challenge was different. They could not simply refine, they had to reinvent. And so began an experiment that would fuse German aerodynamics, British propulsion, and Soviet pragmatism into something the world had never seen. The early prototypes, coded I-310, were brutal in form. A thin mid-mounted wing swept at 35 degrees, a high tail configuration to maintain control at transonic speeds, and a nose intake feeding the hungry centrifugal compressor of the Nene copy, the RD-45. It was ugly, compact, and efficient, a gun with wings. Wind tunnel data from captured Luftwaffe labs showed that a swept wing delayed compressibility effects near Mach 1. The Soviets, who lacked high-speed test tunnels of their own, verified these findings with simple, ruthless empiricism. Fly fast, observe, survive, repeat. On December 30th, 1947, the prototype roared down the runway at Khodynka. When the jet rose clear of the frost, Soviet aviation entered a new era. The machine was christened the MiG-15. Its debut was swift, its purpose unmistakable: to erase the myth of American air superiority. At its heart, the MiG-15 was an aerodynamic revelation. Its swept wings gave it stability near the sound barrier. Its thin airfoil, just 12% thick at the root, demanded precise machining, something Soviet factories had to relearn after years of wartime shortcuts. The RD-45 produced 5,000 pounds of thrust. and was later upgraded to the Klimov VK-1 with 5,950 pounds of thrust, pushing the jet to speeds of 1,075 kilometers per hour. With an empty weight under 8,000 pounds, the thrust-to-weight ratio was formidable for its time. The fighter could easily climb to 15,000 meters, as the Ministry of Aviation had requested. But numbers alone do not make a legend. The MiG-15's soul lay in its purpose, to hunt bombers. American doctrine depended on fleets of B-29 Superfortress, each bristling with defensive guns. To pierce that shield, the Soviets armed the MiG not with rifle-caliber weapons, but with artillery, a single 37mm N-37 cannon, and twin 23mm NR-23s, designed to obliterate a bomber with a single burst. The gun's recoil was so powerful it could pitch the nose off target. But the message was clear. This was a fighter built to kill giants. And soon, it did. Over Korea, the MiG-15 emerged from the north like a phantom.
Red leader, 2 o'clock, a bogey. Gee, that's fast. Look at that sucker go!
American pilots flying piston-engine Mustangs and early jets like the F-80 found themselves outclimbed, outturned, and outgunned. The shock was total. U.S. intelligence scrambled to understand what they faced. Pilots reported swept wings, impossible climbs, and slashing attacks from altitude. The first encounter, on November 9, 1950, ended with a B-29 crash landing in flames. The bomber that had ruled Hiroshima's skies had finally met its match. To counter, the Americans rushed the F-86 Sabre into the theater, a sleek, polished answer to the Soviet challenge. The duels over MiG Alley became the crucible of the jet age. The Sabre had radar-assisted gun sights and better high-speed roll rates, but the MiG could climb higher and accelerate faster. The fight came down to skill, nerve, and tactics. In the thin air at 40,000 feet, they circled and struck like predators locked in an evolutionary war. Behind each sortie, the Soviet machine churned. Pilots trained in secrecy at bases in Manchuria, many of them Soviet World War II veterans flying under North Korean insignia. American pilots grew wise to the difference between the hastily trained Chinese or North Korean pilots and the elite and aggressive flying tactics of the Russian pilots, earning them the name honchos. Among those honchos was Russian ace Yevgeny Pepliev, who would claim 19 confirmed victories, 23 if you asked him. When recounting his engagements against the Americans during the Korean War, he said, "The Americans were psychologically more stable. Our pilots, on the other hand, were more impulsive, more likely to take risks. Sometimes this was justified, sometimes this was not. They were daredevils." The MiG-15's design, though simple, demanded respect. Its high-mounted tailplane suffered from compressibility effects, an early hint of Mach tuck, forcing pilots to muscle through control stiffening. The pressurized cockpit fogged easily, and visibility was poor to the rear. Yet pilots praised its acceleration and climb. The aircraft's modular construction allowed it to be built not only in the Soviet Union, but in Poland, Czechoslovakia, and China, becoming the most produced jet fighter of its era, over 18,000 units. Its service life read like a map of the Cold War, in Korea, Egypt, Cuba, and Vietnam. Wherever American bombers appeared, a MiG-15 or its improved siblings, the MiG-15 bis, waited in the clouds. In 1953, a North Korean pilot named No Kum-sok defected to South Korea in his MiG, granting the West its first close inspection. U.S. engineers were stunned. The correction was rugged, easy to maintain, and designed for quick field repair. Where Western jets relied on precision, the MiG relied on pragmatism. It could operate from dirty runways and be serviced with hand tools, efficiency born of necessity. Yet the MiG-15's greatest triumph was also its curse. By proving the Soviet Union could match American technology, it provoked an arms race that consumed generations. It led directly to the MiG-17, then the supersonic MiG-19, and finally to the MiG-21, each step faster, sharper, deadlier. When production finally ceased, the MiG-15 had flown under dozens of flags and fought in every sky where ideology met force. For some, it was a terror of the jet age, and others a symbol of national pride. A machine that proved that Soviet worker could rival capitalist industry. Its aluminum skin bore the story of a world split in two. And yet, beyond the politics and propaganda, there remains something almost poetic in its form. It was never the most beautiful jet, nor the most refined. It was honest, a weapon shaped by purpose, not vanity. Every rivet spoke of urgency, every line of defiance. In the crucible of the Cold War, American pressure forged Soviet innovation. The MiG-15 was the first spark, the moment when the balance of the skies shifted, when the East found its wings, and when the world realized the heavens themselves had become a battlefield.